7th summit of ASEAN. And as President Lula said after the first meeting with the Prime Minister Ibrahim, this visit has strengthened Brazil's relation with Malaysia to a higher level. It had been 30 years since the last visit by a Brazilian president to Malaysia, and this was the third meeting between the leaders, President Lula and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, in less than a year. The Prime Minister of Malaysia was in Brazil twice recently, so in November last year, invited by President Lula for the G20 summit, and then this year in 2025 for the BRICS summit as a partner country of the group. President Lula, in addition to me, was here with the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock, Minister of Science, Technology, Innovation, Minister of Mines and Energy, the Central Bank Governor, the Executive Secretary, Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Foreign Trade, the General Director of the Federal Police, and the President of Apex. Together with the President, we also had over 100 Brazilian entrepreneurs who took part in the business forum with leaders from 20 of the biggest companies in Malaysia. The Malaysian companies Sapura, Inson and Petronas, they have important investments in the area of investment in Brazil. On our side of things, Valley and WEG, they have operations here already, and we intend on increasing investments in the bilateral trade, which is reaching close to $6 billion in a year. On the 25th of October, President Lula had a meeting with Prime Minister Ibrahim in his ministerial cabinet. The meeting was incredibly productive. And here I'd like to acknowledge how pleased the Brazilian side was with the full support of Malaysia to Brazil's presidency of the COP30, and also the support for them to take part in the Treble of the Tropical Forest Forever facility, which is going to be launched in Belém. We renew the invitation for Malaysia to take part with a high-level delegation at COP30. We also would like to reiterate the support that Malaysia has said for Brazil to take a seat in the Permanent Security Council of the UN, and then this visit is finishing with a signature of an important agreement in the semiconductor sector area, which is going to be core to the bilateral relations over the next few years. Malaysia is the sixth biggest exporter of semiconductors in the world, a sector which is responsible for a true revolution in its economy, and it is with great pleasure that we have seen the great economic development level that actually has had notable growth rates for decades. There is a great potential for technology complementarity by integrating the industries as well as the wide network of science, technology, innovation through Brazilian research centers and universities. In addition to this agreement, we also signed instruments in the areas of science, technology, spatial research, IT, the training of diplomats in agriculture and livestock research. In Kuala Lumpur, President Lula also took part in the Malaysia-Brazil Business Forum as a special guest of the ASEAN Business Seminar. Still on the 25th of October in Malaysia's National University, President Lula was awarded the honorary degree in philosophy for his contribution for international development and the global south. And as President Lula said on the occasion, it is really an acknowledgement not just of him but all of the Brazilian people in their path in striving to reach social justice and autonomy. Yesterday, President Lula was the first Brazilian head of state to take part in an ASEAN summit. Southeast Asia is a dynamic growing hub as well as a technological innovation hub, which is central to Brazil's foreign policy to diversify partnerships and attracting investments. I'd like to thank once more the Prime Minister of Malaysia for this honorable invitation. The summit also had the admission of East Timor as the 11th member state of ASEAN. We have historic bonds with East Timor because of our culture and language proximity, and we offered all the possible support in the country's ascension process to the bloc today. President Lula is going to give a speech to the heads of state to the East Asia group, where he has been asked to talk about the cooperation between ASEAN and BRICS. And also, the president had bilateral meetings with leaders from Prime Minister of Vietnam and Singapore last afternoon. He met Donald Trump in the US, and then, of course, providing sequence with the contacts that had actually started in the UN General Assembly, and after the telephone call which was held between the two on the 6th of October this year. And as I had the occasion of mentioning yesterday, the meeting took place with a lot of cordiality and resuming the line of understanding that should highlight relations between Brazil and US. President Lula requested the suspension of the tariffs imposed in Brazil for a negotiation process to be started so that we may look after and worry about the trade concerns in both parties, as done by two meetings. And as a result of yesterday's meeting, today with the Deputy Minister of Development, Trade, Industry and Services, Mr. Inacio, and also the Special Advisor to the Presidency, Ambassador Aldo Faleres, I had a meeting with representatives of trade from the US, as well as the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent. In the meeting, we agreed to work to build a satisfactory agreement for both parties over the next few weeks. We agreed on a time frame for meetings between the negotiating teams for us to address the negotiations of both countries, focusing on the most affected sectors by the tariffs. I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Marcio Rosa to add a little bit about the meeting that we had this morning. Good morning, everyone. Mr. President, thank you. Minister Mauro Vieira, very quickly, in relation to the discussions with the US, I mentioned yesterday, and I'm going to repeat very quickly, that we are moving forward really, really well today. We are seeing a much more positive landscape than we had a few days ago, and this is because of the political commitment made by the American government, renewed yesterday publicly. And then President Trump has told their team to arrive at an agreement in just a few weeks with Brazil, and then today this was emphasized again. So in a few weeks we are probably going to hash out an agreement. So on our side, following your precise guidance, Mr. President, we did again say that we need the tariffs imposed in Brazil to be eradicated because they are based on untrue reasons. And you said yesterday to President Trump that we may have to repeat this. I say that now we are in a much more positive scenario because there is indeed a political determination for us to arrive at an agreement, and the technical team needs to follow these guidance over the next few weeks. You have already determined that a high-level team go to Washington to engage in these agreements, and there is in no way the discussion between and sectors-wise, because Brazil, no, not Brazil, is requesting for the political decision made to be reversed, and the political aspects that can actually exist, they are no longer on the table, which is something that could never have been on the table, as you, sir, have always mentioned. And thanks to this position, we are discussing a trade agreement, a non-agreement with other nature, instead of just a trade related issues. So thank you, Marcio. I will now give the floor to the birthday boy of the day and President of our Republic, Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva.
I was a little bit sad because I didn't see anyone bringing gifts to the president. It means that no one gave me a gift to my birthday day. But what is important is the following. I'm completing 80 years of age today, in the best moment of my life. I've never felt with so much will to live, and that's why I say to everybody, I hope to live to 120 years. And there's only 40 years left only, because I'm completing 80.
So the man who is going to live until 120 has already been born according to science. And I hope I'm the one chosen by science to do so. So I'd like to say to you that this is another successful trip by the Brazilian government, abroad. I had visited Indonesia for the last time in 2008 when we established a strategic partnership with Indonesia. We have an extraordinary potential in all areas for us to grow our relation with Indonesia. A very good relationship with President Subianto. And here, I had never been to Malaysia before. I had never visited Malaysia. And to be honest, the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, he is an incredibly pleasant, person. He's someone who likes Brazil. He's someone who really wants to have a strong relationship with the Brazilian people. We had meetings with business people in both countries, and also the Brazilian entrepreneurs who came to Brazil. And you deserve to be complimented, because I always think that the president of a country, he doesn't do business. He opens the doors so that the business people can do business, and it is the entrepreneurs who know how to do business. They're the ones that have specific interests. These are the people who actually have specific knowledge, and thus the role of the government is to do and ensure that all trips that I make, we take a delegation of entrepreneurs, and then we have the cooperation from the federations, confederations. But I want to publicly compliment brother George Viana from Apex, who has really been doing extraordinary work, bringing together the business sector in order to take this trip. And we have been very well received. There's a lot of people that want to come to Brazil, see Brazil, to do business with Brazil. They're very much willing to see what is the energy transition that Brazil is thinking about, and what is this wonderful thing of a country that has almost 90% of its electricity from renewable sources, from a country that has oil, and at the same time is a country that defends that we need to work quickly so that we can actually stop using fossil fuels for us to actually do energy transition. And people want to see and know more about our country, and we need to know what the other countries have to offer us.
As for Indonesia, as for Malaysia, these two ASEAN countries, our trade with these two countries is around $12 billion. That's not much, because of the potential that we have of Brazil and this country. This means that we're lacking a little bit of boldness from our business sector and from our ministers. Instead staying at WhatsApp, they should have to work hard to sell the things that Brazil produces, the things that Brazil has to sell. This is something very important. And then afterwards, I was invited to participate in the 45th ASEAN Convention. I'm very happy. I was the first president of Brazil to participate in the G7 meetings. I was the first one of Brazil to participate in the CELAC Latin America meeting, and in the African Union's first president to go to the African Union meeting. And so now I'm participating for the first time in ASEAN meeting. There are 11 countries are part of ASEAN that have an affinity, a great affinity with Brazil. And they like Brazil, they admire Brazil, and they have the prospects to make investments and to attract more investments to Brazil. And so Brazil has left that historical moment that we were just looking towards the U.S. and we only do, and that the U.S. Trade with Brazil would solve the poverty in Brazil. And then they started to look towards Europe, and that Europe would discover. Then we discovered the obvious, that no one would solve Brazil's problems. The Brazilians are the ones that are going to solve their own problems. And so, knowing that, we have to make our economy grow, we have to increase our trade, our foreign trade, and attract more foreign investments to Brazil. And you can only do that with the chemistry that we have to. And you can't do that through WhatsApp or through email. You have to shake hands with the people, look in the eyes of the people, and try to convince the people with words what you're offering a good deal. That's why I leave this country very satisfied because we're still going to participate in the opening session. There's a dinner tonight. There's a dinner. I'm 80 years old today, the birthday, and the dinner will be offered by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and I think it's going to be a very good dinner. I don't know if the press was invited for the dinner, but it's going to be a good dinner. Very well. And I leave back to Brazil tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I wanted to say to all of you that another important surprise in this trip, if you don't believe in destiny, something different happened. Some time ago, shortly ago, when President Trump published in his post a letter, an open letter to Brazil, and imposing the tariffs on Brazilian goods, a lot of people went into a crisis thinking that it was the end of the world, the end of history. And what we said in government, I said we have to keep tranquility and be calm because the decisions that were made against Brazil are decisions that are baseless because these decisions were made with wrong information about Brazil. And this was obvious. That is to say, everybody that read that letter that was posted by President Trump knew that that information about Brazil were mistaken. And so that's why I said to President Trump on the phone call that we have to put people that love Brazil to negotiate. And I'm a president that has highly experience. It doesn't look like, but I have a lot of experience. And you can only send to negotiate people that you want to be against the results, or you want to send people that truly want to reach a deal. If you're favorable to the deal and you put someone that to put a round table to negotiate, you won't reach an agreement if they're against it. That's why we have different styles. My meeting with Trump at the UN was 29 seconds, and then after half an hour phone call, we discussed the subject matters that were very. And then I traveled 22,000 kilometers, and I traveled 20,000, and he traveled a better plane than my plane, and we met finally in Malaysia. Look how things turn around in history. The destiny was already designed. It was in Malaysia that we would have our first meeting so that I could look eye to eye and say to him, and he could look into my eyes, and we could converse. And then, yesterday, in our meeting with President Trump, a very good impression that soon we will not have any more issues between the U.S. and Brazil. And I wanted to say, and I said to President Trump yesterday, that the fact of us having ideological different positions, there is not an impediment that two heads of state can deal the relationship between the states of the two countries with great high respect. I respect President Trump because he was elected by the people, president of the U.S., and he respects me because I was elected democratically as the president of Brazil. Once putting that on the table, everything becomes easier. Everything becomes easier. And I said to President Trump what I thought, and I wrote it, I handed it to him but in writing so that people will not forget. See, sometimes people forget. So I hand over to him a written agenda, what I wanted to say to him. I gave him personally a copy of what is on our agenda. That It would be very difficult to continue sanctions against justices of the Supreme Court because of the trial against Bolsonaro was convicted, former President Bolsonaro. And I also said that it was baseless. The information that he got that Brazil and the U.S. had a trade deficit with Brazil. We proved to President Trump that there's a $410 billion of surplus for the U.S. And last year, the U.S. in our trade with Brazil had a surplus of $22 billion. And we're not complaining about our deficit with the U.S. Instead of complaining about the deficit, we have to increase on our productive capacity and the quality of our product and to sell more to the U.S. That's how we do business. And I should say bluntly that I was surprisingly very good. I was surprised for our meeting that I had with President Trump yesterday. It was very good. And I'd like to say to all of you, Mauro, Foreign Affairs Minister, that is a negotiator, Mauro, Márcio Rosa, and the Finance Minister, Haddad, they will be part of the negotiation table. They know that if we rely on Trump and myself, we'll reach a deal with the U.S. It's very important that you sit around the negotiation table. If someone says no for the things that we have written and delivered to President Trump, it's not from his side and neither from my side that we're vetoing. We two presidents are winning so that Brazil and the U.S. can continue to have a good relationship as we have for 201 years. We're talking about 2 centuries of diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Brazil. Sometimes we have certain issues. Sometimes it was dangerous, like in 1964, that the U.S. supported the military coup. But we leave all the issues of the past because what matters in the negotiation table is the future. What are you going to negotiate from here onwards? And they know what we want. First, we want to suspend the over tariffs and negotiate. It's funny that I'm the only president in the world that I recognize that the president of another country has the right to put on hikes on tariffs if these goods and services that are being imported are causing damage to their domestic industry. And once in a while, my minister said to me, you got to tax 15% against Chinese goods imported to Brazil. So I think it's the right of a president of a country to hike tariffs if they're damaging the country domestic economy. But what cannot happen is what happened with Brazil. On the basis of mistaken information, they made a decision to impose tariffs to Brazil up to 50% when they have a surplus trade with Brazil. Now, there's no more middlemen. Now it's President Lula talking directly with President Trump. Either we like each other or not, we will have to take the responsibility as heads of state to know that our action has to bring benefit for the peoples that elected us. This is how I deal with this issue. And I leave very optimistic this country, and possibly we have a meeting already in Washington with our negotiator. He said that he has the will to visit Brazil, and I said that I'm willing to go to Washington where he wants to meet me, because if there's one thing that I learned in life was negotiation, to bargain. And it wasn't during my presidential term. It was much before, when I was in the bargaining table, and I survived in the bargaining table, and I know to make concessions and when not to make concessions. And so if the meeting should be fair, we start from the scratch. We start from the scratch, and where do we want to reach? Where do we want to go? And if there's this willingness of President Trump, as he said he has this willingness, that he has all the willingness to reach a good deal with Brazil, and then I said to him, Brazil has highly interest to also make a good deal with the U.S., we will have no problem for any sector in the economy of Brazil, and we don't want to bring problems for our relation between the 2 largest democracies in the hemisphere. And I said to President, on the phone, that Brazil and the U.S. are the 2 most important democracies of the Americas and in the world, or the Western world, in the Western hemisphere. And we have to play a role model. We have to serve as an example of free trade, of multilateralism. And this is what I'm continuing to do. I have President Trump's direct phone number. He has my direct phone number. And now if our middlemen fail, they know where things will reach and who's going to get the blame for it. because many times I was in the meeting yesterday and I should say to you, the most enthusiastic person was President Trump in the meeting. Now see, obviously, in our teams, there are people that agree, people that disagree, that want to make an agreement or not. I want to say to the Brazilian press that is here, I am convinced that in few days we will reach a solution for the issues of Brazil and the U.S. and we will do it in a joyful way, as the Brazilian composer said, because that's how I go back to Brazil, very much satisfied, and I'm sure that everything is going to work out very well for the Brazilian people. So now I'm at your disposal for your questions, to answer to your questions, whatever the questions you may wish to ask. Okay, let's start from Rodrigo Rangel. Rodrigo, you have the floor. Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Rodrigo Rangel. Well, President, I asked with the chemistry with President Donald Trump was much more intense yesterday. And for how long do you believe that the sanctions could be suspended? And when was mentioned Bolsonaro, he regrets what's going on with him, but he didn't show that he wanted to much concern with over tariffs. What did you say about Bolsonaro's action try to solve the tariff issue in this crisis that Brazil is having with the US? You made all the questions already. I heard that it was one question. Well, let me say something. Sincerely, I'm very optimistic with the meeting that I had yesterday. I think that we're going to find a solution for Brazil. Nothing that is not fair for Brazil. And on my side, the truth, and absolute truth in the world that I carry, the U.S. has now trade deficit with Brazil, because that was the explanation to imposing higher tariffs against Brazil, because was it for those countries that were running, the U.S. was running with the U.S. deficit. Of the G20, only 3 countries have the U.S. has surplus with. It's Brazil, Australia, and UK. So he knows the truth that the U.S. has a deficit in its trade with Brazil. The second issue that he raised was about Bolsonaro's trial. I told him that Bolsonaro's trial was a serious trial with hard evidence against Bolsonaro. No evidence from the opposition. This is a true reports of people that are on trial. And I told him the severity of what they tried to do in Brazil. I told President Trump they had a plot to kill me, to kill my vice president and the Chief Justice Moraes, and he had the right to defense, which I did not have. And so, this is not under an issue. There's nothing to discuss on this matter. He had a fair trial, and he knows that once you leave power, that's it. And so Bolsonaro is part of the past now in Brazilian politics. And I even told President Trump, if you have 3 meetings with me, you're going to forget Bolsonaro. That Bolsonaro doesn't mean anything anymore. Because I'm not talking in a personal tone, I'm talking in political tone, defending my country. I invited him to go to COP 30. It's important to you to go to that meeting and say whatever you think. If you don't believe in the environmental issues, but we can't pretend that there's not a climate change crisis in the planet Earth. And let's see what's going to happen. I am sure that this relationship, and I say to everybody, the best relationship that I had with the U.S. was with President W. Bush. And in the first meeting that I had with George W. Bush, I wanted to invite him to Brazil. He invited us to participate in the Iraq invasion. And I told him that Brazil didn't want war. My war was against hunger and to overcome this war in Brazil against hunger. And we won this war against hunger. The same thing is going to happen with Trump. We never met before. And if you get to know the person just by bystanders, it's more difficult. You have to feel, you have to shake hands, you have to look in the eyes to get to know and see the procedure, the behavior of the person, how the person reacts. And I think that sincerely, I think that we had a sincere talk in our relationship that we're building. I have no problem to say that I think it's possible that you will be surprised and the very good relationship that we're going to build between the U.S. state and the Brazilian state. And he has his own political thought. I have my own political thought. But when we talk, it's not me and not him. We're heads of two democratic states in the Western Hemisphere that are talking. Now, the second issue is that I believe we're going to have to suspend some sanctions and certain tariffs and start from scratch, and the punishment and sanctions against our justices. There's no rationale for these sanctions, and that was said in front of Mark Rubio, and this I said for his Secretary of Treasury, and in the USTR representative. And I said, so I handed over this document, and this is what I want to discuss, to have between Brazil, the Magnitsky Law, and we want to discuss the tariffs, the Venezuela, the discussion of Venezuela, everything that we need that are on our agenda. And he read the paper that I handed over to him in my front. He read everything, and he was surprised when I said that in the sanctions against our justices, and they sanction our health minister and his daughter at 10 years age, and he was surprised when I said that. So now I believe that we have established a relationship between Brazil and the U.S. I'd imagine that wouldn't happen. Those that thought that it wasn't going to happen, we're going to have a productive relationship. And those that betted against that are going to lose their bet. And that's it. Let's go to the next question, Daniel Zahad from Reuters agency. Just a minute for the president to put his headset, please. Presidente, está me ouvindo? Presidente, está me ouvindo? Presidente, está me ouvindo? Bem, bom dia. Esse é o Daniel da Reuters, agência Reuters de notícias. Presidente, não está me ouvindo? Presidente? Just a second, sir. Presidente, está ouvindo? Presidente, está ouvindo? Presidente, está ouvindo agora? Está ouvindo bem, presidente? It was turned off, his headset. So let's go to the question. Daniel, please speak close to the microphone.
Sure, all good, okay. My question to you,
Bem, a minha pergunta para você, presidente. O presidente Trump fez alguma promessa para o Brasil? Essa é a pergunta, se ele fez promessas com relação ao Brasil. No. No one should make promises to me. I'm not that kind of person. You make promises for saints, not for a president of a country, of a republic. For me, what he has to do is assume commitments, and the commitment that he assumed is that he intends to reach a good quality deal with Brazil. And this is in my mindset and his mindset, that we want to reach a deal. I didn't want to leave any doubts to President Trump who I am, where I came from, and what I think, how I think. Because only when we get to know each other is that we can start to respect truly people, when you get to know them personally. And so sincerely, although he didn't make any promise, he guaranteed to me that we will reach an agreement, a deal. And I think it's going to be faster than many people are thinking. And it's going to depend also on Brazil, on the Brazilian side. We're not babies or children that we have to wait for someone to call us. We're not kids. we're highly interested, so we have to go after what we want. I told already my negotiators. He went to Korea, he went to Japan, but if we relying on this week's results of these meetings, I'm going to already bug him with another phone call from Brazil, depending how the negotiations move forward, and he can do the same thing. He also has my direct phone number. So I don't use mobile phone. He has the chief of protocol, my chief of protocol number. He can call to the chief of protocol anytime he wish, and then we can talk directly if the negotiations don't move. Let's go to the next question. Agora do Brasil, presidente da Band. Good morning. What you know that Brazil wants to discuss the tariffs that were imposed by the U.S. government. What do they want? The issue that was China, rare earth. Yesterday you talked with them about Venezuela. What are the chances, President, to have a more serious situation against Venezuela? And what do Brazil is willing to offer and what they want? Well, President Trump didn't say what he wanted because I started a conversation with him saying that there is no veto for any subject matter in our discussion. Whatever subject matter that he wants to raise and put it on the table, we will do it. If it's trade issues, if it's relations with China, with Venezuela, there's no forbidden theme for us to discuss. If he wants to discuss critical minerals, rare earth, this ethanol, there's no problem. We can discuss anything. I am in permanent metamorphose in discussions. You can raise any issue, and I'm willing to discuss any matter, any wish. That's how I learned to bargain at the bargaining table. There's no veto for any issue. If it's interesting for you, put it on the table, and I'll discuss it. Because to convince me, it's easy. Nothing was raised. I raised the Venezuelan issue to him, saying to him, because what's coming out from the newspaper, things are being aggravated with Venezuela. And I told him that it would be extremely important to take into account Brazil's experience as the largest country in South America, as the most important economic country of South America. We have 8 neighbors that he should take in account, that Brazil can help him in the relationship with Venezuela. And I told him that we created a group of countries, friends of Venezuela, and I only had 15 days in office, 20 years ago, and I was in Ecuador, inauguration of the new president, and Chavez was facing a big problem with the U.S. in those days, and so I proposed the creation of a group of countries, friends of Venezuela, and we managed to guarantee that there will be a referendum in Venezuela with the support of the U.S., and so we're willing to help in any matter with Venezuela. And I would like that President Trump will take into account that we're a peace zone. South America is a peace zone. When we were voting for the new constitution, I voted that we voted to participate in the non-proliferation treaty. It's not a speech or a discourse. I voted for Brazil not to carry atomic weapons. So we're the only country in the world, maybe, that has written in the constitution that we do not accept atomic weapons. So this was made very clear. If the U.S. needs support, help from Brazil to deal with the Venezuela issue, we are willing to help because we want to keep South America as a peace zone. We don't want to bring the conflicts of other regions to our region. That's it. Let's go to the next question. Sir, please speak to the microphone. Wait a moment. Presidente, está me ouvindo? Ok. Olá, senhor presidente. Bom dia. E parabéns. Eu sou de uma agência de notícias da Malásia. Minha pergunta será a seguinte. A Malásia faz parte do BRICS. Você vê que tem uma chance da Malásia se juntar ao BRICS? E o que você achou da sua viagem na Malásia, presidente? Well, I learned in my life that our human behavior is always to take into account the main thing is what is most important, the rest is secondary. And the main thing that you asked me in your question is to know if I want Malaysia to be a full member of BRICS. Well, I would like to say to you that Malaysia will have the support of Brazil to be a full member of BRICS. And I can say to you that I take away from Malaysia the impression, the most positive impression that I can take from Malaysia. First of all, because the people are very friendly, very nice. Every place that I go in Malaysia, it looks like I've been here before. There's always someone smiling, someone very kind, and so it's a little bit like the Brazilian people, very friendly, very nice. So I leave in Malaysia with the best impression that I could. I leave with a wonderful impression of the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. And I leave Malaysia with the meeting that I had with your government. And I leave the country in a very positive way with the meeting that I had with the business sector of Malaysia. And I hope that I leave with a good impression after the dinner tonight, homage. And I'm going to use a special shirt that I won as a gift here from the government so that I can go to the dinner as if I was a Malaysian, dressed like a Malaysian. Let's go to the next question.
Good morning, Mr. President. Your secretary stated that the political issues are going to be off the table in the negotiations. Is this what was agreed with the negotiators from US? Okay, please repeat. I didn't understand you. Your executive secretary, Mr. Inacio, said that political issues are not going to be on the table for the negotiation. This is what was agreed with the American government yesterday, but you have just said that you're open to discuss any issues, okay? Even political issues. So I'd like to know what is your alignment in the negotiators and whether or not political issues are going to be part of the negotiation or not. Okay, let me say something. The political issues, they're going to be discussed in the presence of both presidents, okay? Not when you're discussing business, because if you're going to discuss politics in this sort of Brazil and US thing, is President Trump and President Lula. They are going to negotiate the trade tariffs for the importers and exporters in, even the matter of the legislation in relation to the punishment of our justices is a political decision that me and Trump are going to solve, okay? Just to be certain that you've understood me. Okay, now we're going to go for Allegra Mandelson from the Telegraph from the UK, also in English will be the question. O presidente está me ouvindo, né? Bom, o Brasil é um dos membros fundadores do BRICS que tem desafiado, digamos assim, essa ordem mundial centrada nos Estados Unidos e a China tem desempenhado um papel líder dentro dessa ordem nova. Então, enquanto o senhor falava do otimismo do senhor que o Brasil e os Estados Unidos vão chegar em um acordo, me parece que as políticas e tarifas do presidente Trump tem empurrado o Brasil mais perto para a China. O senhor gostaria de ver uma nova ordem internacional com a China liderando, digamos assim, em cima dos Estados Unidos? Look, Brazil doesn't have a preference for countries. We want to have relations with all countries in the world. We don't accept a new Cold War. which for 50 years, kind of threw humanity to two sides. You're either, in favor of Russia or the US. What we actually want is, we don't want any Cold War between the US and China, because we want to have a beautiful relationship with the US and a beautiful relationship with China. It's not because the tariffs that our trade with China increased. I mean, our trade has been increasing for a while, and today China is Brazil's biggest trade partner, and I wish for it to continue to buy, because everything that the Chinese want to buy, Brazil has to sell. And I hope it is the same with other countries. What I want is that Brazilian economy and the health of my country doesn't depend on just the one country. What I want is for us to depend on all different countries in the world, a little bit with everyone. So we haven't got any preference. I mean, of course, I do think it is important, the growth of China, as I'd like to see Brazil growing the same way. And if we're able to conclude everything that we're thinking about doing, perhaps in 10, 20 years, it'll be Brazil who will be in the front line negotiating with many countries. This is what I'm working for. This is what I believe in, and I want to continue to have a beautiful relationship with China, with the US, with the European Union, because it is important to remember that after 22 years, in December this year, we are going to sign an agreement between the European Union and Mercosur, which is something that had been deadlocked for a long time, and now we are going to unlock this in Brazil's chairmanship of Mercosur. So we are also having an agreement of Indonesia with Mercosur, Malaysia Mercosur, ASEAN and Mercosur. So our thing is to do business, and this is why, I travel with a lot of ministers, and this is why Favreau, when we reach 500 new markets achieved in this term, he's going to hold a party in his ministry, and then perhaps I'm going to have some roasted beef for us to eat at the ministry. And this is what we want to do. I don't, have a problem with U.S. relations. He can have relations with whomever he wants. I don't want any disputes with anyone. Okay, Brazil is, if Lula is, all peace and love, it is Brazil, peace and love. We don't want any war. We want peace. We don't want, troubles. We want negotiation. We don't want, delays. We want results. This is my logic as far as, directing my country. And I'll give the floor to America from CNN. And before the question, let me just make an observation. Hey, a good journalist needs to be where the news is, right? Okay, America, you're up. This is the journalist that asks me the most questions. It's a pleasure. I mean, journalists need to be where the news are. So, Mr. President, I'd like to know a little bit about the chemistry of President Trump. We have the information that he was quite impressive with your political trajectory, that he liked your trajectory, your history. He complimented you on your political history. He admired this. And do you also admire his history trajectory? And if you do so, what features are we talking about? I think we have two completely different trajectories. History, I came from the plant floor, from a poor person from the northeast region who didn't starve to death until I turned 5 because I was lucky. I managed to survive and became a president of the republic. His is of a successful man. He is a rich, successful businessman, and he addresses politics completely different from me. What I said to him, and I was very moved when I knew that he knew about my story, I told him that my relationship with him doesn't have anything to do with our ideological, political thinking. I respect him because he was elected President of the United States, and of course I just want to be respected because I'm the elected President of Brazil. And then I don't have anything new to say when I tell you that human beings is 80% chemistry and 20% reason and emotion. We are moved by emotion. We are moved by the way that we look, that we feel people. And I think that, whoever actually knows about my political history, they know that this is a story that has to be respected, because it is not easy for Brazilians to actually elect someone without higher education certificate to be the president of the republic. I mean, the political scientists never thought about this, never wrote about this, so it is important for him to know about my story. A lot of people don't know my story. A lot of people talk a lot of gibberish about me. I know where I came from, I know where I am, and I know where I'm going when, I leave office. And if something that I have achieved in my life is to walk holding my head high, and you have no idea how much this is important. Someone who came from below to be able to walk holding his head high, knowing that there is nobody better than you, but that you're not better than anyone else, So this thing with respect is something which is important. And I've learned that human beings, they'll only respect if you respect yourself. If you don't respect yourself, no one will respect you. Nobody likes those, people who, suck up to others, who are just sucking up to others. We need to be who we are. And I think this is what happened with me and President Trump. And I hope that this chemistry gives results to the Brazilian people and to the American people. And I've not actually told him, I'll talk to him very soon, that we can also sort out this war in the Ukraine, because I think that, the war is in its point of maturity now, because, the war has been going on for 3 years now. And then Putin knows what he wants, Zelensky knows what he wants, everybody knows what they want. What they need to do now is bring that to the negotiation table, and I think that we are reaching the point where we can actually finish this war in the world. And we don't need war in the world anymore. What saddens me is that last year we spent $2.7 trillion in weapons last year, and we didn't spend 10% of that to eradicate hunger in the world. And what saddens me is that you finish the massacre in Israel, but you don't recover the lives of over 70,000 women and children who, were innocent and died because of the irresponsibility of the Israeli political leader, not the people of Israel, but a political leader. So these things, is what makes me be very candid and truthful when I talk to people. I like to say to people, and talk to people about what I feel. This is my face, okay? I'm not two-faced. This beautiful face that you see, this is me, right? Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for the conference. One question, please. Let me just say one thing, just to be honest, okay? Just to be honest, we have a list. Raquel, you're going to ask a question too, but we have a list which was chosen by the journalists. I just didn't want to jump the queue and the line, okay? That lady with the microphone, she's been with her hand up ever since the start. Let's follow the list, which was defined by the journalists. So the next on the list is Assis, right? Let's follow this, because an agreement that we've made with the journalists, If you signed the agreement, it's signed and agreed amongst them, Mr. President. Okay, Assis. So you have the floor, Assis Moreira, Valor Econômico, Mr. President. I'd like to continue on the question. Okay, the question on China. We see as an international economy how the world is ever more fragmented, is more complex, full of uncertainties. I need him to speak closer to the microphone. I'm not getting his audio properly. If somebody could ask him to speak closer to the microphone, if possible, because I am missing his audio completely. If anyone could tap it, please. This is the interpreter. I can't hear him. Basically, politically speaking, is a bit more normalized. So if it is normalized, I'd like to know, do you, sir, think that there is any need for any adjustment in Brazil's relation with the US and China? Is there a need for us to rebalance any of this? Or, and then just to add, Mr. President, sorry, and if you talked about China with President Trump at any moment, let me just say something to you. Well, first, we haven't signed an agreement with the US, okay? What I said is we are going to arrive in an agreement, and I'm optimistic, and I think that this agreement will be signed, as fast as we can. And this has no implication on Brazil's relations with China. Brazil is going to continue to have, its relations with China, with Malaysia. We're going to keep our relations as we have with the European Union without any problems. These are two completely different things, okay? I mean, there is no conditions for us to actually have an agreement, nor would I actually accept this kind of condition. And I don't think he would also propose or accept conditions. The US, can have an agreement with whoever they want. It's the same thing with Brazil. This is a rule for free trade in the world.
Okay. All right. Let's do the following. We still have 6 names that came to us. 2 additional ones, and Daniel from Bloomberg, and then we will close. This was the agreement that we had with the journalists. Please. These were chosen by the journalists themselves. Good morning, President. I would like to go back to the subject matter of Venezuela. What expertise you could bring to the negotiations? What was President Trump's reaction when you made yourself at his disposal about the Venezuela crisis? And the second question, Indonesia was the first time that you mentioned to run the elections without conditioning that to your health condition. What has changed to you for you don't make this caveat anymore about your health care? Well, I shouldn't have said in Indonesia that I was running for the Brazil's elections for president next year. It was a mistake on my side. There's no vote in Indonesia for me, so I shouldn't have mentioned that I'm going to run for the fourth time, for a 4th term. We did not deepen the discussions about Venezuela. I was the one that I raised the issue because the paper that I handed over to President Trump, I included Venezuela. I know the Venezuela situation very well. I know what's going on in Venezuela, and I think it's very important to be solved under a negotiation table, around a negotiation. What I said to President Trump is that Brazil has expertise because we did this already vis-a-vis Venezuela. And I was only 15 days in office when I took office in 2003, when we created a group of countries friends of Venezuela to solve the issue in a democratic way. We choose the Secretary of State of the U.S., Colin Powell in those days, and Spain, that was the first country in Europe to recognize someone had tried a coup d'etat against Chavez in Venezuela. And I remember today that Fidel Castro, you're selling out Venezuela to imperialism. And I told my friend Fidel Castro, I said the following: no, we're doing a negotiation. We're creating a group of countries, friends to defend democracy in Venezuela, not a group of countries friends of Chavez. And to strengthen democracy in Venezuela, we need people that has respectability from the opposition in Venezuela. You can't talk just with one side of the fence. And I believe that it's necessary to find a solution for Venezuela. If there's the willingness to negotiate. And Brazil is interested that there should be no war in South America. We don't want wars in South America. Our war is against poverty, against hunger. And if we didn't manage to solve the hunger issue, how are we going to go to war and to kill those that are in hunger? And so I want to go to the bargaining table, and this is the suggestion that I present to President Trump. Let's start a negotiation table. We have the willingness to talk and to help on the Venezuela crisis. What we can't say is that you can't solve things on the basis of bullets. That's it. So thank you very much. till the next press conference and take the next trips. Let the president leave first, please. Let's wait the president to leave the press conference hall.